Well, welcome everyone back to our Inside Look At series. Once again, I'm Sean Morton, and with me today, I have Mo Cashman, who is our Principal Engineer and Director of Advanced Technology Specialists at McAfee Enterprise. Mo, welcome to the Inside Look At series.
Thanks, Sean. Happy to be here.
So, Mo, we're continuing our series on our 2022 threat predictions, where we've recently discussed topics around social media and the weaponization of that, and then we've had a few topics around ransomware. And today, what I'd like to do is pivot us to one of my favorite topics around containers. So for this prediction titled, Hijackers will target your application containers, it generally states that we're going to see an expanded exploitation of containers that will lead to endpoint resource takeovers and compromises. So given that, Mo, the first question to you, why do you see containers being a bigger target for threat actors this year than in years past?
Yeah, I think it's sheer numbers, right? So, last year, I think, Gartner predictions, about 75% of organizations, run their apps in production or container apps in production, and they expect that to really expand. More than 85% of organizations will be doing that, by 2025, according to their research. So really, that attack surface is just large and growing, and we've already seen a lot of, or at least one APT group that we're tracking, Team TNT, which is specifically targeting Docker containers, Kubernetes, and the components there. I think in addition to say the numbers, it's really the complexity. I think it's an ecosystem, right? It's not just containers and a piece of code. It's APIs, it's data, it's databases, it's applications, it's web services. It is the orchestration layer there. So it's really an ecosystem that is on premise and in cloud. So very complex environment, which we see as challenging for security teams and even IT teams to manage. So that combination there, the numbers, the complexity, and say maybe a bit of a security challenge, skills gap even, leads me to think that that's going to be a bigger threat this year than before.
Got it. It makes sense. Who do you see as some of the key risk groups that you anticipate will be targeted for expanded exploitation in the future?
I think there's potential for exploit across all those risk groups, and we're talking about the ones that the CSAs put out. But in particular, in containers and registry groups, so I see more potential for, say, application vulnerabilities, especially in, say, web pages, databases, insecure images, which can be exploited. We saw this in a campaign that, again, we're tracking called the Siloscape backdoor. So again, specifically, going after those web services. I think across all the groups, though, there's potential for, say, unauthorized access through misconfigurations or, say, insufficient privileges and access control, especially in the API and orchestrator systems like Kubernetes clusters. That in particular is probably going to be an area to particularly take a look at. And with everything new and everything that works fast, misconfigurations happen, and people make mistakes in both privileges as well as network control. So those things are really, really important. And I think generally, I think the speed of the DevOps lifecycle, right, and again, that skills gaps perhaps in the security team is going to really increase risk across all those different groups.
Got it, and those make a lot of sense. And given those attack surfaces, what sort of techniques are you seeing being used, and really as protectors, what should we be looking out for as we protect containers?
Yeah, well, in broad terms, we see a similar method as in other attacks that say target workplace systems. So in land, expand, exfiltrate, I'll use that one. So land through weak or stolen credentials. Like I mentioned, the web app vulnerabilities or misconfigurations could also be a landing spot. That's really the entry point into the enterprise, finding a weakness and getting a foothold. Once they get a foothold, they try to expand, find ways to move beyond that initial entry. And we've seen a couple of minor techniques that are prevalent. One is escape to host, which is techniques which allow attackers to gain access to the underlying system that's hosting all this code, and that's usually through privilege escalation, and that allows the attacker to sort of drop payloads, malware, run commands that allow them to move laterally or do something else. The third piece is exfiltrate, and this exfiltration is really just one impact. There could be destructive impact. Could also happen through exploiting one of these vulnerabilities. But exfiltration to cloud storage we've seen is particularly being used as a way to move data outside of a corporate or the victim environment, let's say. And what do we need to do? What do we need to keep a look at? I think it's getting visibility over multi-cloud environments. Almost everybody today has got multi-clouds, AWS, Azure, Google platforms. So just getting visibility and then getting control over those infrastructure platforms, and of course all the host infrastructure. Trying to continuously reduce that attack surface, especially when it comes to misconfigurations and privileges. And privileges is a credentials are an attack surface. Got to have a relentless focus on protecting that, and then monitoring for, say, data anomalies or user access anomalies. And with that ecosystem, that could be challenging. So you need to think about where you're going to collect that data. So that's what I think is some of the key things to get started with.
Makes sense. So given that, and you talked about this a little bit already, but what are some of the possible implications of these vulnerabilities and exploiting them? What could we potentially see?
Yeah, I think again, this is kind of like another entry point into an enterprise. So the impact, the implications is going to depend on the intent of the attacker, of course, right? And we've already seen a myriad of sort of serious implications happening. Credential theft used to expand and exfiltrate sensitive data, for example. Just think about that. These applications, these containerized apps are most likely hosting very sensitive data, customer data, something that's going to have a serious impact if that's stolen, either through financial loss or reputational loss. So these are supporting these key business applications. And if there's a different kind of intent that's, say, not exfiltration but destruction, that could have a bigger impact into that into the business resilience of that enterprise, or even hopefully not into critical infrastructure attacks, into IoT, for example, applications that are controlling critical systems. Don't want to see those go down or not be available, because that could lead to sort of a cyber physical impact. Other things that we've seen, crypto mining software being deployed to really consume resources, perhaps increase costs, but exfiltration of data, the credentials, I think that's really where the most serious impact. But can't underestimate the cost implications that might occur as well from other types of malware. Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, I truly appreciate your views and your recommendations here around this important yet evolving quickly topic around containers. So for everyone out there, please continue to check out our full 2022 threat predictions. Please do listen to our past Insight Look At sessions as we talk through each of these in more detail. Cheers and stay safe.
Great. Thanks, John.